It's a Cold War night patrol in the late 1960s. A Soviet nuclear submarine vanishes beneath the North Atlantic. No distress call, no wreckage, no survivors. For decades, the official explanation was simple: mechanical failure. Case closed. But new high-resolution seabed scans captured by a modern deep-sea drone tell a different story. Because what was just discovered inside that submarine doesn't just challenge history, it rewrites it. And it reveals a kind of horror no one was supposed to ever see. More than 100 Soviet sailors died when the submarine disappeared. Many of them were in their early 20s. Their families were never given bodies, explanations, or closure. In some cases, they were told their sons had died in training accidents, while classified files erased the details. For decades, historians believed this loss was tragic but routine, a reminder of how dangerous early nuclear submarines were. But that assumption shaped everything: how navies assessed reactor safety, how Cold War escalation risks were calculated, and how environmental dangers were dismissed. If the accepted narrative is wrong, then it means key warnings were ignored, design flaws were concealed, and human decisions, not fate, sealed the crew's fate. What we're about to examine isn't just a wreck, it's a frozen moment of catastrophe that still echoes today. Here's where the story takes a turn. The submarine was a Soviet nuclear-powered attack submarine, lost during a routine patrol in the late Cold War era. Official Soviet records claimed a sudden onboard emergency, possibly fire or mechanical failure, followed by total loss. But from the beginning, there were contradictions: no SOS signal, no debris field, no confirmation of reactor shutdown, patrol area data that didn't align with the official story. Western navies tracked the sub acoustically across the North Atlantic, then they lost it. Abruptly. The silence was complete. Fast forward to the present. An international seabed mapping project using autonomous underwater vehicles equipped with synthetic aperture sonar detects an anomalous object at extreme depth. And get this, the signature doesn't match any known geological formation. Follow-up missions deploy long-range side-scan sonar, magnetometers detecting abnormal metallic density, and a work-class remotely operated vehicle rated for depths exceeding 4,000 meters. The sonar image resolves into a familiar silhouette: a Soviet-era nuclear submarine, resting at a slight list, hull largely intact. No explosion crater, no implosion signature. Already the official story starts to crack. If the submarine didn't implode or explode, then something else happened first. Something internal. Something the crew was dealing with while the rest of the world assumed they'd been swallowed by the sea. Researchers reportedly go quiet during the first full scan. One expedition member later describes it as finding a tomb that still felt occupied. The Cold War assumption was that the submarine suffered a catastrophic pressure failure. That theory explained the silence and avoided uncomfortable questions. But here's where it gets complicated. The hull tells a different story. Using photogrammetry and three-dimensional laser reconstruction, engineers map the pressure hull down to millimeter precision. Metallurgical analysis is performed remotely on exposed hull sections using laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy. The real kicker is what they find: no inward buckling consistent with deep water implosion, hull deformation localized around internal compartments, evidence of extreme internal heat, not external pressure. Control surfaces locked in non-emergency positions, and the most disturbing part, the forward escape hatch is sealed from the inside. Bottom line, this suggests the crew was alive and attempting containment, not escape. Containment, which raises a terrifying question: what were they trying to keep from spreading? Naval historians begin to describe the wreck not as a casualty of the sea, but as a deliberate sacrifice. The implications were immediate and terrible. The Soviet Navy insisted the reactor shut down automatically. That claim reassured the world and minimized environmental concern. But no one had ever seen the reactor. Until now. A radiation-hardened, remotely operated vehicle equipped with gamma radiation sensors, thermal imaging, and high-definition manipulator cameras carefully approaches a breach between compartments. The footage it sends back changes everything. Inside the reactor compartment, they find shielding partially compromised. Evidence of rapid overheating, not gradual failure. Control rods appear misaligned, not fully inserted. Melt patterns inconsistent with standard shutdown procedures. Radiation readings are elevated but stable. And what makes this particularly chilling is what that stability means. The crew managed to prevent a full meltdown, at the cost of their lives. This reframes the disaster entirely. Not an accident, but a desperate last-stand containment effort. A nuclear catastrophe was narrowly avoided by sailors who were never acknowledged for it. For the first time, the crew are no longer victims of failure. They are agents of sacrifice. But what happened to them in their final hours? That's the question that haunts every researcher who has studied this wreck. Interior scans using low light, optical cameras, and structural mapping allow researchers to reconstruct movement patterns without disturbing the site. What they find left historians speechless, compartments sealed sequentially, emergency procedures followed to the letter, signs of prolonged exposure to heat and toxic gases, no evidence of panic-driven evacuation. The crew stayed at their posts. They knew what was happening. The horror isn't monsters or mystery. It's duty carried to its absolute limit, under conditions few humans could endure. It's young, men in their 20s making impossible choices in compartments filled with radiation and smoke. And the silence afterward wasn't just the ocean. It was political. Families were never told their sons may have saved entire coastlines from contamination. They were never told that what happened down there wasn't fate, it was sacrifice. This was not inevitable. The technology had finally arrived to hear what the wreck had to say. The most shocking truth is this: the submarine didn't simply fail. It contained a disaster. Every piece of new evidence, from the intact hull to the reactor scars, points to a crew that chose containment over survival. They sealed themselves inside a nuclear danger zone to stop something far worse from escaping into the ocean. The official story called it an accident. The wreck reveals it was a sacrifice. And for decades, that truth lay hidden beneath thousands of meters of water, until technology finally reached a depth where history could no longer hide. What they found was not what anyone expected. The story we have been telling for 50+ years was wrong. This discovery forces us to rethink how we remember Cold War disasters. Not as cold mechanical failures, but as deeply human moments shaped by fear, secrecy, and impossible choices. It also raises ethical questions. How many underwater war graves remain unexplored? When does discovery become disturbance? And how many acts of quiet heroism were buried to protect political narratives? The ocean didn't hide this story out of malice, it hid it because no one could reach it. Until now. And if this truth was waiting down there all along, it makes you wonder what else is still hidden. Not by depth, but by denial. Not by the sea, but by the governments that chose silence over acknowledgement. These sailors deserved better than to be forgotten. They deserved better than to have their final act reduced to a single line in a classified report marked mechanical failure. The technology exists now to find these wrecks, to map them, to understand them. But the question remains, do we have the courage to tell the stories they reveal? Because sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what sank beneath the waves. It's what we chose not to see. If this discovery changed how you see Cold War history, let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share. And tell us what hidden story you want Reef Report to uncover next.